That's 2 down and 21 Red Bull wins to go. So the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix happened, and it was alright. It was filled with a bit of controversy, some nice moves from a couple of people, but overall had a somewhat predictable ending in that it was a Red Bull at the top step of the podium in the end. But how we got there was an interesting turn of events. So let's hop into my race review for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. As ever, we'll start with running through the race results for this Grand Prix. We had in P1, Sergio Perez, P2, Max Verstappen, P3, Fernando Alonso. So the same repeat of the podium in Bahrain, just in a slightly different order. We nearly had a Mercedes on there, with George Russell finishing P4, and the controversy / strange goings on around Fernando Alonso's 10-second time penalty at the end. The back and forth between that. We didn't know until I think an hour and a half after the race if he'd actually finished P3 or not. But there we go. He got to keep his podium, which was good because it was deserved. But yeah, P4 for George, P5 for Hamilton, P6 Sainz, P7 Leclerc. Really tough race for him. P8 Ocon, P9 Gasly. Magnussen was in P10, rounding off the points. Yuki Tsunoda just missed out in P11, with Nico Hülkenberg bringing P12 home. Guan Yu Zhou P13, Nick de Vries 14, Oscar Piastri with a now best finish and only finish race-wise of a P15. Logan Sargent was P16 and Lando Norris was P17, with Valtteri Bottas coming home in last place, P18. We had 2 DNFs over the course of the race, Alex Albon and Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll I believe it seemed to be an engine issue. He sort of said he was losing power slowly over the course of a couple of laps, and eventually had to stop out on track, which brought out the safety car, which made the race a little bit more exciting for that period of time. Probably was the one that what caused Max to get that P2, cheap pit stop and all. Alex, still not sure if the team have said what the issue was there, but he did manage to make it back to the pits, I believe, before having to retire the car. So not the best race for him, or Lance for that matter. Looking at our fastest laps then, the fastest lap of the race, which was quite entertaining, was a 1 minute 31.906 from Max Verstappen, and he achieved that on the final lap of the race after being told, when he had asked what the fastest lap was, that it was not a concern by his team. Clearly it was a concern to Max. Ultimately that means that he is still leading the World Championship by 1 point over his teammate Sergio Perez. Obviously Perez, up until the final lap, had that fastest lap point, so would have been leading the championship. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting little back and forth between those guys if it is only the Red Bulls fighting for the championship, but we'll see how that plays out over the course of the season. Fastest pit stop was again Charles Leclerc, Ferrari, with a 2.1 seconds, so a slight improvement on the 2.22 of the first round, Bahrain. Again, Ferrari getting their pit stops spot on. Seems to be the only thing they're getting spot on at the moment, but at least that's something for all you Ferrari fans out there. So then, my points of the race: drive of the weekend, fail of the weekend, honourable mention, team of the weekend, losers of the weekend, and of course my race rating. So starting with the driver of the weekend, I'm going to have to give it to Sergio Perez. Really a faultless race for the Mexican defence minister. The only thing he didn't defend very well was that start. Alonso got him off the line, and for a couple of laps we thought we were going to finally get that win 33 for Alonso. We were all hoping it was, written in the stars. He was in garage number 33. This would have been his 33rd win if he'd got it. So it was all there laid out, but it wasn't meant to be today, at least. But Sergio, after he got back in front of Alonso, he controlled the race really well, including the safety car restart. I think he actually caught Alonso not napping, but a little bit unexpected, because he already managed to pull a gap quite quickly on that restart. So yeah, really well managed race from Sergio. He is becoming a bit of a street track specialist, adding them to his tally. I'm trying to think what else he needs now. He's got obviously Monaco, he's got Singapore, he's got Azerbaijan, now he's got Saudi Arabia. So you've got some crossover street tracks like Miami and Australia for him to still add to his repertoire. But yeah, overall good race from Sergio. My fail of the weekend then, and I'm going to have to give it to Charles Leclerc. He should have been able to do more. It's plain and simple as that. He started in P12, which was higher than Max in P15, and finished behind Max. With that car, even though it has limitations, he should have really been able to do more, I feel. Ultimately couldn't even get up past Carlos Sainz, who also didn't have the best race in the world. But Leclerc, given his potential and his pace, I would have thought he could have at least made it a little bit higher, maybe P4, P5, if not the podium, but just wasn't meant to be. Ferrari have really got a bit of a mare on their hands this year, because it appears that they're going to be fighting for that P2 slot, not just with Mercedes like they did last year, well, at least towards the end of the year, but Aston Martin as well. And the way things are going, Aston Martin and Mercedes are getting a bit of a jump on Ferrari. Of course, they're equal points now in the championship, I believe, on 38 apiece, with Ferrari lagging behind slightly. So they're going to need to step up their game. Leclerc needs to sort of get his head down, which is, to be fair to him, tricky when you're already on your third control electronics for the season and taking grid penalties. So cards definitely haven't fallen in his favour, but I was expecting more from the Monegasque this weekend. My honourable mention, and I'm going to give it to Yuki Tsunoda. Finished just outside the points, P11, but boy was it a scrap for that P10 spot. Magnussen in the end getting him, which is a good drive from Magnussen, but I feel like Yuki worked a lot more for it, coming up the field and maintaining that race pace with what I think is a worse car, which is why I'm giving it to him as the honourable mention and not Magnussen. You could hear how sort of distraught Yuki was when he did get passed by Magnussen. He sort of yelled out on the radio, and in his interview after, it looked like he was crying. It might have been just the sweat, as it is quite hot out there, but he was really wanted to get those points. Of course, AlphaTauri and McLaren now the only two teams that don't have any points on the doors, so we'll see what they can do moving forward. But yeah, Yuki Tsunoda, honourable mention. Team of the weekend, and could it be anyone else other than Red Bull? Again, back-to-back team of the weekends for me. Quite faultless, as I've mentioned, from Sergio Perez. A stellar drive from Max, up from P15 to P2, even though he was helped by that safety car and got that cheap pit stop. Who knows, if it would have been a red flag like we had in previous years, he probably could have won the thing. But Red Bull, faultless race. The only thing that went wrong for them was Max's drive shaft, which is why he ended up where he did. But then, at least we got a bit of entertainment out of it. Otherwise, I think he would have just run away with it. But team of the weekend, Red Bull. Losers of the weekend then, and it's again a repeat of last race, McLaren. What an awful time they are having. It's sad to see. They did appear to have pace. Oscar qualifying, I think he was P8 in the end after Leclerc's penalty. Lando unfortunately messing up in Q1, touching the wall and I think breaking one of his wishbones, the suspension on the car, and so wasn't able to get out for another run in Q1, thus getting eliminated. The race wasn't much better for the Papaya team. Damage caused by a touch from Gasly, who did squeeze Oscar. Oscar was sort of giving everybody space and being quite cautious going into turn 1, but it was that second turn where Gasly squeezed Oscar a bit too hard. It went wheel to end plate on the front wing, and that broke off, causing damage to both Oscar's car but then also Lando's car further back as he went over the debris, causing both cars having to come in for a change of front wing, obviously change of tyres at the same time, but it was then just a hard fight from the back at the end. Went on different strategies, neither seemed to really pay out for them. Surprisingly, the hard tyre that Oscar was on for pretty much the whole race, a bit like Albon in Australia last year, did come back to him towards the end, and so he got in front of Lando and in front of Logan, so at least he got a little bit of action, but Lando at the back of the pack, just sort of surviving basically. We really need to see a step forward from these guys if they want to be fighting for P5 or even P4 in the championship this year. As I've already touched on, they are the only team aside from AlphaTauri yet to score points this year. Even Williams have scored a point, obviously it was Alex Albon in round 1. So yeah, not looking good for the team, but I'm sure if you look at last year and how they were performing at the beginning of the year, they managed to pull it together again. I'm sure they'll be able to do something along those lines again this year. Lastly then, my race rating. I don't think this was as good of a race as Bahrain, if I'm being honest, so I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. We had a bit of jeopardy with Max being further down the field, same with Leclerc, but ultimately there wasn't masses going on. It's better than average, I'd say, hence why it's above a 5, but I think Bahrain was a better race. We had that story of Alonso battling through the field with Mercedes and the Ferraris to finish P3 like he did. This time it was more of a management race from him once he fell back from P2. Like I said, there's a couple bits of jeopardy, a couple good storylines like with Yuki Tsunoda, Kevin Magnussen, but aside from that, the rest of the points finishes kind of just fell into place. Didn't really see all too much happening with the Alpines. Who knows what could have happened if there wasn't a safety car, whether that would have spiced things up a bit, a couple more battles for Verstappen for example, and if Stroll had stayed in the race as well, how much further forward he could have gone. But like I say, not a bad race, not an amazing race, so 6 out of 10. And that's it for my race review of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix Round 2. Next up is Australia, which for me, being in the UK, is a nice early lights out at 6 AM. Not complaining about. I wouldn't want to be an F1 fan in New Zealand, for example, every race being more or less starting in the morning. So yeah, looking forward to Australia. It's a good track, good races in the past. Let's see if they bring back the trialled additional DRS zone that we saw briefly last year. But yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment, and goodbye for now.